Hello, you are watching Talking Europe on France 24. I'm Catherine Nicholson. Now, as we know, the European Union is currently greatly preoccupied by one member state that is supposed to be leaving the bloc. But as the United Kingdom grinds on with Brexit, several countries are eagerly working towards joining the EU. One of them, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, has a unique hurdle to overcome: its name. Neighbouring Greece has long been unhappy about the republic sharing a name with its own historic northern region. As a result, Athens had for a long time blocked Macedonian attempts to join both the EU and NATO. Well, a deal between the two countries' governments had looked to have unlocked the issue earlier this year, but there is still some resistance on both sides. Today we will be discussing that issue and more with Foreign Minister Nikola Dimitrov. Thank you very much for being with us.
Great pleasure.
And I thought we would be best off jumping straight in with the name dispute. Our reporter Onko Ula has this little report for us to bring our viewers up to date.
What's in a name? When it comes to Macedonia, that question has been sparking debate for decades. Over the past 27 years, neighboring Greece has seen the former Yugoslav Republic's use of the term Macedonia as a claim on its own province of the same name. As a result, Greece has repeatedly blocked Macedonian aspirations to join the EU and NATO. In June, after decades of torturous negotiations, Athens agreed to change that policy if the Balkan state changes its name to the mutually agreed North Macedonia. For the country's prime minister, it was a no-brainer.
On the 1st of October, we will wake up and look at ourselves in the mirror and see smiling faces, proud faces, happy people, because we will have secured our children's future, because very soon we will be living in European Macedonia.
On September 30th, Macedonians voted overwhelmingly in favor of the name change. In a consultative referendum, more than 90% backed it. But turnout missed the 50% mark, which is required for the vote to be officially recognized. Opposition leaders called the poll deeply unsuccessful, saying the government had lost its legitimacy. It also added fuel to the fire for Zaev's detractors, who see a name change as an affront to Macedonian national identity.
We
want to join NATO and the EU, but we want to join with our heads held high and not with our heads bowed. We don't want to enter through the servants' entrance, but through the main entrance.
A few weeks later, the Macedonian parliament held a marathon session filled with drama and confrontation. Lawmakers eventually backed a constitutional amendment to change the name. The next stage of the amendment process is set for January, when lawmakers will vote on whether the final text should be adopted.
We heard a suggestion there in the reports that Macedonia is less Macedonian if it's called North Macedonia.
The region, historically, of Macedonia is now within three countries: Macedonia, the Republic, part of Greece, in the northern part of Greece, and in western Bulgaria. So I think accepting this geographic designation is not really making us less Macedonian. The dispute is deeply entrenched. It has been there for 27 years. It's also about a historic reconciliation between the two nations. And I think one of the pillars of the agreement is an article where we say the two countries recognize that they have a different understanding when they say Macedonian or Macedonian in the Republic of Macedonia, to be, if this is successful, North Macedonia, and in Greece. And they're not necessarily contradicting each other, but they're coexisting in a way.
Do you believe that this really is finally, after all of this journey, about to be resolved? There is still resistance from within Macedonia and from within Greece.
There is resistance. Both opposition parties say that they will be able to do a better deal, but better from the Greek perspective and better from the Macedonian perspective mean two different things. So when you put those two statements together, they most likely lead towards a no deal, qualified majority, in our case, is always a fragile matter in politics. We work on it on a daily basis, and we really believe that we're going to be able to proclaim a miracle, and that we can prove that miracles happen even in the Balkans. We can't change history, we can't change geography, but we can hopefully shape our future. And this is about our future. This is about creating friendship between the two nations. It's really historic. And usually what's historic is not easy to do.
It's interesting you say to me there about miracles are possible even in the Balkans. Of course, your region has an extremely complicated recent history, let alone the last 100 years and beyond. Now looking to try and join the European Union, what would EU membership bring to your country? It would be a very, very small member state in an enormous bloc.
I was asked once in London, why do you want to join when we are leaving? And I said, well, you on the inside sometimes forget how cold it is outside.
In what sense?
When you look at the club, quote unquote, from the outside, the distance actually helps to appreciate what the union is about. And when we say we want to join, it's not sort of the formal act of becoming a member. If we join today, Macedonia will still be the same country. So it's about becoming European in terms of how do we fight corruption, if our media are free, if politicians are held accountable, if jobs are created and the salaries are solid.
Well, we're talking about that process. It's been reported that France and the Netherlands were two of the EU member states who have been most strongly opposed to launching the start of accession talks. We'd been expecting that in summer of 2018. Looks like it's being pushed back by a year. There were cited concerns about corruption in Macedonia, about judiciary reforms. I looked at the Transparency International rankings, and they do give Macedonia a score of 35 out of 100 on corruption perception, with 100 being the cleanest, so a relatively low score. Perhaps France and the Netherlands have a point, and maybe your country isn't quite ready at this point to begin this journey into the EU.
We've been a candidate country since 2005. And our first positive recommendation by the Commission was out in 2009. And since then, we've had a successive positive reports. The last one of April this year is actually saying backsliding was reverted. And we've received good marks on some of the fundamentals of what a European democracy should be like. On media freedoms, on the rule of law, the independence of the judiciary. So, in a way, what we talk about is a start of a journey, not the end of the journey.
Do you believe the EU should be helping your country with that journey?
Engaging is actually less costly than non-engaging with the region if we want the Balkans to be orderly, governed by the rule of law, exporting products and services, and not people seeking a better future beyond the borders of their homeland and beyond problematic governance, let's say. So I think we are at a place where we are today globally, but also in Europe, because we have often neglected problems and we have often missed opportunities for progress. So I think it is time to be honest. It is time not to overly politicize the process. For us, it is not, we want to convince also European voters, not only governments, that the accession process can actually transform a country. And that's why the process is much more important than the actual date. It can take 10 years, maybe it will take longer, but what's really important is for us to become European, not to formally join.
Well, on a related issue, your government has very recently agreed to a prisoner amnesty. This is part of a bit of a deal with the opposition in Macedonia to get support for the name change deal. It includes amnesty for opposition MPs who stormed the Macedonian parliament in April. Clearly important to your government to get the name change deal through, try and head towards the EU membership. But rights activists talk about this being a dangerous precedent, continuing a culture of impunity. Is this cutting off your nose to spite your face, in a sense, perhaps proving that there are rule of law concerns?
This is a challenging, let's say, balancing between two important principles. One is the principle of accountability. Our government was actually born out of the well-spread thirst for justice in the face of a wiretap affair that brought to the surface a widespread abuse of office. So our basic promise essentially is accountability. Now, we also have the challenge of deep political polarization in the country, partly as a result of this crisis. So how to work on both? And I think as long as politicians do political acts not through the judiciary, so there is a clear, transparent distinction between what judges and public prosecutors do and what politicians do, and striking the right balance. But
you accept that you're walking a tightrope here. You are leaving. Your government's leaving itself open to criticism.
It's a very fine line.
Yeah.
And I don't think amnesty will be offered to the organizers of the attack on the parliament or to those who took part in the actual acts of violence, but to those probably who we're still to see the actual draft law, who took part in the crowd, so to speak. But in a way, I think the best that we can do is a wise combination of the art of the possible and the principles that really matter. And the accountability is probably on the top of that, on that list.
We don't have a lot of time left, unfortunately, but I would like to talk about one EU country that is already posing a problem for your government, Hungary. A former Macedonian Prime Minister who's fled a 2.5-year jail sentence for corruption in Macedonia has been granted asylum in Hungary. He's known to have been close to Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister. Do you have a message for Budapest over this?
We received clear recommendations in the conclusions of the General Affairs Council in June this year that accountability is important, in particular at high level and highest levels. So in the context of delivering on that promise, rule of law must not be selective. It applies to including former prime ministers. We have now a very awkward situation where the person in question, convicted already, Mr. Gruevski, sought asylum and received asylum in a member state in Hungary. Talking about principles and the art of the possible, I recently met with my colleague Peter Szijjártó, the Hungarian foreign minister, and we concluded that we share, we have many interests that are common, including making the region European. We have a significant trade relationship with Hungary. We have that difference. And I told him that we will do all legal action available. We have sought extradition. And we will wait for the Hungarian court to make a decision in that case.
But your country is in somewhat of a weak position, perhaps, in this case.
Well, we have to maintain the general relation, bilateral relation with Hungary, while convincing them and making our case that Gruevski should face justice. They treat this as a purely legal issue. So we'll see how this will proceed.
Well, just before we round up the interview, back to the EU. It's a bloc that's taken a body blow from Brexit, of course, but there are also internal splits, rows between Brussels and Hungary, Poland, potentially Romania. Is this still a club that you want to join?
The EU is what we make out of it. I think if we learn how to think big again and be bolder, we can make the EU what it should be. It has a shaken self-confidence, but I think we don't really have a viable alternative. So we really have to reinvest if we want to matter globally, if we want to face issues that cannot be dealt with properly at a national level. We need to be united. I was recently at the Schuman Foundation in Paris, and I was rehearsing the quotes, and what he said back in 1948, if we want to survive, we need to unite. I think that applies as well today. For us, we're going to build a small Europe in our part of the region. We have to make it. We are going through the second chance of our generation, and we will make it.
We'll finish on that note. Nikola Dimitrov, Foreign Minister of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for your invitation.
And thank you very much for watching the programme. We'll see you in the next part of Talking Europe here on France 24. Join us for our Talking Europe special edition that's all about Europe's islands. There are thousands of them in the EU, and 4 of the member states are entirely surrounded by water. We're travelling to Malta and Martinique in the French Caribbean to find out about some of their particular challenges, from how these islands feed themselves to the ever-increasing threat of climate change.
Talking Europe on France 24 and France24.com.